So last night I saw your stage, which was amazing. It was very powerful. I liked it a lot. I enjoyed it a lot. But I feel that now the violinist has a much more stage presence than before. Probably because now the accordion player was out. What do you think about it?
Well, I think it's true. Of course, the accordion player, they did a lot of stuff together, and now it's only him sort of having that role. But we've also kind of written more stuff over to the violin. The violin has in the years become our kind of lead guitar in a way, so he's the sort of lead instrument guy in the band. And but I guess it's partly true because changing from accordion to keyboards is, of course, the keyboards is more static because he can run around and move. So.
Okay, so have you ever thought of adding the brass player, besides the violin player? Because the brass instruments play a big role in your music. So have you ever thought of adding some trumpet?
Definitely, we've even done a show or a few in Finland where we had a small sort of brass section and stuff like that.
Live?
Yeah, live.
Oh, that should be amazing.
But it's of course pretty challenging, especially coming to Japan or some stuff like that, to be able to pull that off. So, of course, if for some festival or something like that, it could be pretty amazing to do.
How many brass players played there?
On that show, I think we had like 3. We also had some 3 string players.
Trumpet and
like a trombone, French horn.
Wow, that should be amazing. Okay, so what about the accordion player? Are you thinking of adding another accordion player, or the keyboard is good enough now?
It's not even about being good enough. It's like I think it was kind of, we started to feel, even when having the accordion in a band at some point, that it's not a very sort of diverse instrument, and we have a lot of orchestral elements and different sort of elements to it. And accordion, the sound of accordion was just one sort of small detail, but it wasn't used that much. And now with the keyboard player, it allows us to do so much more. Even he's sort of playing everything from some orchestral parts to more kind of rock keyboard playing, like with some mellotrons and organ stuff going on. And I think that brings that kind of rock edge to the band a bit more as well, which I like, the live sound of the band. And but we haven't really thought about bringing in an accordion player. I think it was very clear when Netta decided that she wanted to quit the band and leave the band, that we felt that the accordion was maybe more for, of course it was an important part of the band and the brand of the band, the sort of image of the band, and kind of a gimmick a bit as well, something that people knew us for. But musically the keyboard is much more
easier.
It's easier, but it's also like it's better, because we can do so much more with that. And accordion was more sort of for show off, I guess.
Well, right, you were using a lot of organ sound last night.
Yeah.
That's great. And your music is very varied. I'm sure you were influenced by a lot of different music. First, I'd like to talk about metal music.
Okay.
So if you have to pick up one band, who influenced you the most musically, who will it be?
Out of metal bands?
Yes.
I would say Sepultura, maybe.
Really?
Even if you don't hear it in our music, but I think Sepultura in a way was one of the first kind of more extreme bands I got into.
Which era?
The sort of Arise and KSAD kind of thing. And from there I then sort of discovered black metal and stuff like that. But it was also maybe the band that gave us kind of the thing, what Sepultura did, they changed album by album. And even as when listening to it, of course, at some point you didn't like one album, or at some point I just stopped listening to the band because I didn't sort of find it interesting anymore. And sometimes when you're young, you're very sort of extreme about things like that. And also some other bands, I think that happened to me, where at some point for some reason I decided that I don't like this band anymore, and then later on I sort of listened to the stuff and discovered like actually this is pretty good. I don't, that kind of thing. So, but I think from Sepultura we kind of got that, maybe more the mindset that we just want to sort of not do the same album over and over again, but have a band that's sort of in constant evolution and moving forward and trying new things, even with the risk of kind of losing your some audience. But in many ways I feel that maybe only later you can look at something like the Roots album by Sepultura and realize that they were actually just 10 years ahead of their time, and they kind of started new metal, something that I don't like at all, but that became very big, but much later. So that's what I sort of really like about that band, that they were sort of really pushing the envelope a lot.
Okay. Yeah, because it's very difficult to detect the direct metal influence on TURISAS, because you sound totally different from any other metal bands. So.
Yeah, I think it's more like picking up things here and there, so it's maybe more like song by song you can maybe pick out that, okay, this sounds a bit more like that metal band and a bit more like something else. But yeah, on the new album there's some songs that are sort of more punk orientated even, and stuff like that, so a very different approach there. But I think the sort of melodic black metal in the sort of end of the 90s when we started out was kind of a big thing at the time as well. And well, out of all time, I think the biggest influence in our sound of metal bands would be Balsagoth from the UK.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah. That's something you can probably hear. It has that sort of pompous and very keyboard-driven element to it, and it's a funny band because it's more of a cult band because it never got really super popular or anything.
Okay, cool. Okay. Then what about classical music? Did you like classical music, or is there a big influence on TURISAS music from classical music?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not like, I don't listen to classical that much. I can't say that I sort of have all the Sostakovich at home on constant play or anything. But I like to go to opera and ballet once in a while and that kind of stuff, which is of course half of it is the music at least. And I think personally my taste in classicals is maybe the bit more modern, like Stravinsky or something like this, and not the very sort of Mozart kind of classical is, of course you can appreciate it, but it's a bit too structured in a way, and I more like more the more sort of experimental stuff
from maybe 20th century.
Yeah, that kind of thing. But it's nothing. It's like I can't claim to be a sort of master in that area.
I have an impression that Finland has a strong connection between classical music and heavy metal, because your violin player's father is a famous conductor, and when we played in Finland, one of the promoters was the grandson or great-grandson of Jan Sibelius. So I don't know, what do you think? It's usually heavy metal always has a strong connection to classical music, but it's usually one-way love from heavy metal to classical music.
Yeah.
But in Finland it should be quite different, you know.
Maybe in a way, I think what's different in Finland that heavy metal is maybe considered more, it's more mainstream than in other countries maybe, but it's also doesn't really have that. I think that the days of where heavy metal was only for losers and you know, school dropouts, at least in Finland that's sort of past, and people consider it as a sort of, it's a respected genuine sort of art form and style of music. And I think that's probably the first step to also gain the respect from the others, and not only, as you said, not have that one-way love relationship thing going on. And yeah, we've done like collaboration. For instance, we did this one thing with the jazz pianist called Iira Rantala for the Yle, which is like the Finnish BBC or the national TV. And that kind of thing to us is of course very kind of flattering, because it in a way means that we're not only sort of respected in our own group, but also by contemporaries who are sort of world known jazz pianists, for instance, who we work with together. So that's really cool.
Yeah, as you said, heavy metal is very big in Finland. Why is that? What is the difference between other countries and Finland? Do you have any opinion about that?
why heavy metal is so popular in Finland.
Yeah, because I grew up listening to heavy metal in the 80s, but in the 80s I did not think Finland was a heavy metal country.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden in the 90s, in the beginning of 90s, death metal boom came and black metal bands, a lot of black metal bands came from Finland. Now you guys, Nightwish is very huge. What was the trigger?
I guess it of course comes with the success of one band, and then it builds upon it on themselves, I guess.
Who was the first to make it?
I don't know. It's a bit a hard question because it depends where you draw the line. I mean, there was bands like Valtari and there was bands like Impaled Nazarene and that started out very like in the 90s or something. I don't think we had. Well, we did have. If you go even further back, we had Hanoi Rocks in the 80s.
Yes.
And things like that. But that was kind of a one-off thing. It wasn't like a movement really, like Finnish 80s rock music. That was the only thing that ever came from Finland in the 80s, I think. That really made it anywhere globally. But in the 90s, a lot of bands started going, and I think step by step they got more and more success. And towards the end of the 90s, where you started having like Children of Bodom coming out, and well, Stratovarius was around for a long time as well, and Amorphis. So I guess Amorphis was even in the early 90s was kind of already sort of making the way, but it wasn't as big as it is now. So it's sort of been an upward curve, I think. Step by step. And when bands like Amorphis, for instance, has success, it sort of, we grew up listening to Amorphis and got a lot of influence from their sort of folk thing, and but also the fact that they were a band that wasn't really doing that much in Finland, but looking abroad. And when we started out from the very beginning, we had a very sort of direction that we want to head out to the global audience rather than just a Finnish audience. And I think the success of bands has also generated the sort of respect, and now more and more you start to have like support programs for actually exporting Finnish music. Of course, everything from ethnic to jazz and classical, but also heavy metal. So, because heavy metal is actually one of the biggest export music in Finland.
Because we have a Finland festival even here in Japan, so it's heavy metal is a big export.
Yeah.
Okay. So aside from heavy metal and classical music, what will the big influence on TURISAS music, like the brass parts and non-metal music? I thought it might come from classical music, but you, as you said, you were never a huge fan of classical music.
Well, I think the influence comes from classical music, but I'm not the kind of person who can sort of name drop every sort of movement in some symphony middle part somewhere. I'm not a big classical music bug, but I think you can sort of pick up a lot of stuff even if you don't sort of listen to it every hour all the time. And I think, of course, the sound we have is more the sort of maybe cinematic and kind of film score sound in the classical elements that we use. So it's more the kind of everything from Morricone to big film scores basically, and picking up them doing kind of classical soundtrack kind of thing and getting influenced by that kind of thing. But it goes a bit song by song for us as well. And for instance, on the new album there's one song which has some clarinets and some saxophone as well, which is more of a sort of, I don't know, kind of more this Eastern European Balkan sound to it rather than a classical approach, even if it has sort of wind instruments to it. So I think it's very sort of song by song based, really.
Do you know or do you like the Italian band called Area?
I've heard the name, but I'm not really familiar with the music.
Yeah, I just have some impression that some of the song is similar to the track by Area, because they were influenced by a lot of Balkan stuff. So this is